Mm. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending the Lunch and Learn series hosted by the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits and the North Carolina Office of Strategic Partnerships and VolunteerNC. Today's program will be recorded and available on the VolunteerNC YouTube channel. The webinar link, as well as any materials provided by today's speaker, will be emailed to you by tomorrow afternoon, along with the survey and a link to register for our next program. Please complete the VolunteerNC Lunch and Learn survey. Your responses will enable us to continue providing programming relevant to your organization. Put your organization in the chat box, and our moderator, Ms. Kim Shaw, she's actually not our moderator, but she is our moderator, but she's gonna assist me with that. And today's guest speaker, we have Ms. Kim Shaw. We are gonna be co-speaking together. Ms. Kim Shaw is the Executive Director of the Triangle Nonprofit and Volunteer Leadership Center. She has more than 30 years of nonprofit leadership experience in board development, strategic planning, marketing and communications, fundraising, human resources, and finance. Thank you so much, Kim, for leading this discussion with me. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daphne Moore. I am the Volunteerism Manager for VolunteerNC. I am tasked with the role of overseeing the 2023 Governor's Volunteer Service Award. I have had the pleasure of actually speaking with some of our audience members. So we thank you for tuning in with us, and I will hand the floor on over to Ms. Kim. Thank you.
30 years of experience. Boy, I feel old. I must have started when I was 5, right? Yes. So we can start sharing the screen, and we'll jump right in because we've got a lot to cover today. And we've got a couple of exercises also to try to energize some conversation. But today we want to talk about ways to recognize your volunteers, and we're going to spend the first half of the time on some generalized discussion on why it's important to recognize your volunteers, and what motivates those volunteers, and how we can appropriately recognize them based on their motivational preferences. The last part of the session will be devoted specifically on how we will fill out, hopefully all of you will fill out and complete the governor's volunteer nomination form. So are you going to move the slideshow through, Daphne, or do you want me to?
I'll do it, Kim.
Okay.
All right. Oh, Lord. Okay.
So I kind of went through that already. We're gonna go through some ways to define ways to meaningfully recognize volunteers. So I'm just going to jump right into that part. And some of you who are very experienced volunteers already know some of this. So I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir, but others of you who may be new in your role, hopefully this discussion would be helpful to you. So at the very beginning of the process, where we say meaningful recognition begins at the beginning, and it does, one of the first things that you'll want to do is to define roles that are meaningful for your volunteers. And just like you do for your staff members, to create clear job descriptions. We often refer, and I think it's appropriate to do so, that our volunteers are really unpaid staff. And if we can set up policies and procedures to treat them hopefully well as we treat staff, that's a successful formula. So when you're doing that and you're creating these job descriptions, just like you do in your job description for paid staff, identify who on that for that position will provide support, who does that volunteer report to, and give them a very defined list of tasks and responsibilities. And when you're recruiting, make sure that you are recruiting to fill the needs that you have. Just like if you were to start a job and they wanted you to be an IT expert, and that was not who you were, and that was not in your set of experiences, then that's not going to be a good match. And so that you're not going to be successful in an organization where your skills and the needs of the organization are not matched well. So thank you for going to the next slide, Daphne. So what you want to do is to provide tools after you've gotten your job description and you've recruited the perfect volunteer, to provide the tools that they need. So think through that when you are developing the job description. What tools does this person need to be successful in their in the job that they're doing for us? Do they have a good workspace? Do they have all the materials that they need? And I think a lot of us probably do that first one fairly well, but I think that these last three items are areas where a lot of organizations could probably beef up some of their efforts there. And that is to, measure the impact of your volunteers and then share that with them. People like to know that what they do makes a difference. And we'll actually get into that a little bit more as we go through the session. But measure the results, measure the impact, and share that with them. And the third point, and share that with them. Communicate that again with them so that they know that what they're doing really makes a difference. And in general, it's really important to establish a culture of appreciation, and not just for volunteers, for your own staff as well. So knowing that the efforts that they're making on your behalf are really appreciated. So we're going to have an exercise to talk about what are some, how can we develop meaningful recognition strategies. And so we're going to have 5 different poll questions, and I'm going to ask you to do just a little bit of homework. Daphne and I were really trying to figure out how we can make the poll results aggregate, and maybe one of you are so Zoom savvy that you could do this, but we couldn't figure it out. So we're going to have 5 different poll questions. And what I want you to do is to record your result for each of those questions. For all of the questions, there are 3 choices. You've got A, B, or C. And it's not that you don't perhaps do some of both of all 3 of those, but which is the one that is the one that you do the most? What is your preference most of the time? So for poll question 1, when you're doing a job, you like to have specific goals. Or B, you prefer to work mostly alone, that you're pretty self-directed and you like to be your own boss. Or C, you're not so comfortable when you're working alone. You would rather work in a group. So if you'll just take a minute and choose A, B, or C, and we'll look at those poll results. And I want you to, for yourself, jot down which of those you selected for this question, A, B, or C. So if you'll just take a minute and do that poll. And Daphne, do we have the results for that? Did everyone have a chance to complete it? Can't hear you.
I don't think it gave them an option to even to answer.
Okay. So we will, it didn't give, it came up on my screen to choose. Did everyone get that on your screen? You can say yes, no, give me a think.
It
no.
didn't.
Shannon says no.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Looks like.
Give me a moment, Kim, and I'll get this
And
situation.
Jennifer, Jennifer Taylor Ivy, yes, we will be recording this. So if the connection is poor, we will be sending that out. A link, right, Daphne?
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So do we want to try this poll again, or we can just do this manually, and we can throw up the question and I'll ask everyone to record their preferences, A, B, or C, if that's what we need to do to, I know we're on a tight
Right.
timeline.
Yes, I think the best thing to do would be to move forward and have them
Okay.
as an option.
Okay, so poll question 1, I'm going to go on to poll question 2 then. So do you like A, do you enjoy sharing your experience and offering advice to others? Do you get energized and prefer to work in a group? Or C, do you get satisfaction from seeing tangible results from your work? And like I said, some of this may be true. You all may be going, well, I do A, B, and C, but which one is your preference most of the time? We'll give everybody just a moment for that. Okay, poll question 3. You like being able to influence decisions? We're coming back to it. You accept responsibility eagerly? Or C, you try to learn more about the people you work with and you like to get personally involved with them. I don't mean like dating. I mean like you just want to get to know them. Of course, you may want to date them. I don't know. I'm going to stop talking now before I fall into a ditch here. So we'll give a minute or two for that, or a few more seconds. This shouldn't take too long. Let's go to poll question 4. So A, you place importance on your reputation or your position. You're frequently competitive and enjoy outperforming the expectations from others, or outperforming others. Or C, you enjoy being liked and accepted and are, concerned about the opinions of others. I love that all of you are putting it in the chat. We'll be able to do a personality analysis on you now. I'm joking. So poll question 5, and it's the last one. So A, you think about helping and consoling others. B, you're verbally fluent and persuasive. Or C, you're restless and innovative. Okay, so now not the big reveal, but maybe somewhat. We're going to talk about what did these questions mean, and how do your responses fall out. So in the next slide, for question 1, so research from Points of Light, which has done a tremendous amount of research and work in the area of volunteer and volunteer management. They devised these questions, and they have identified 3 major motivational factors for volunteers. That volunteers like to volunteer because they get a sense of achievement, or that they can influence what's happening, or they like the affiliation with others. And so these questions that you just answered are ways to kind of define where your preferences are, but I would suggest that might be something that you would do with your own volunteer crew, is to just survey them and see where your volunteer pools fall out. If you've got a lot that are motivated mostly by influence, or mostly by affiliation, or by achievement, then you might decide to design some of your strategies a little differently in order to focus in on those. So for those of you, let's see, we can do a show of hands. So how many of you, and we won't go into that much detail on this, but for question 1, how many of you chose A? Show of hands. Can you show the hands without having to turn your cameras on? Okay, looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 3 or 4. How many of you chose B? Hands down and hands new up. Not many for influence. And how many for C, affiliation, for the first one? A couple. Looks like maybe not everyone. I'm trying to get a sense of where the crowd mostly is going, if it's the achievement, the influence, the affiliation. But on each of these questions, you can see that like question 2, when you answered that, they're all designed around folks that enjoy relationship. So that's really what happens with so for question 2, you get energized and you prefer to work in a group. Well, obviously that would mean then that you like working with other people. And so you're motivated by the affiliation factor. And for C, you get satisfaction from seeing tangible results from your work. You're motivated by achievement. You want to get something done and see the results of that. And then for question A, it's you're influencing a decision, you're sharing some of your experience in order to have a positive result. So let's go past the results and jump into a little bit more discussion on some recognition techniques. So we'll go, I think it's go past this poll question through the answers, Daphne. So the next one, yeah. So we talked a little bit about to retain your outstanding volunteers. The previous screen there, Daphne, sorry. We talked a little bit about doing written job descriptions. We talked about trying to match up the skills that you need with the skills that that volunteer offers. You want to make it interesting. I mean, you don't want to lose a volunteer because they come in and it's a boring task that they have to do every time. So checking in with your volunteer to see how they feel about what it is that they're doing, and that they may not be jumping up and down over the prospect of sorting files, but if that's something that they don't like to do and they're doing it every day, then you would want to consider shifting that task that they're doing. You're going to want to make sure that they get good training, that they understand what it is that you're looking for and that you need in that task, and that they get trained to do it. Having the resources to do it. And if you can, try to implement some things where they learn something new as well, where it's an interesting position that they're filling for your organization. And this quote I thought was really appropriate, that one of the main reasons that you lose volunteers isn't necessarily because of anything other than they weren't managed properly. It's not necessarily that they didn't like your organization or that they didn't like the mission of your organization, but that we didn't provide the management background for those nonprofits. And a couple of other things as it relates to communication. We can go to the next slide. To develop a volunteer handbook. I'm not going to ask the question of how many of you have a volunteer handbook, but just like you have an employee handbook where you're outlining roles, responsibilities, policies, and procedures, your volunteers need that as well. And they like social connection. Even those that like to work alone still like to know that there are others that are involved in that work that they're trying to make a difference. We talked about treating them as staff, even though they're unpaid, and to communicate with them, to show them that what they're doing makes a difference. And an important piece of all of this is that feedback loop. We said communicate, communicate, communicate. That's communicating to them, but it's also listening to the impact, to the inputs that they have about what they're doing, and perhaps ways that we could do things better, because they're doing it, and a lot of them have a lot of great experience where they can inform what we do differently. Next slide. So this is just some research from verified volunteers, and what volunteers are actually saying. And they say that one of you can see the number one reason of what keeps them engaged is that they understand the impact of their service. The very close second is the relationships that they build within the community and with each other. They like having continued opportunities to build skills and gain experiences. And they like to be recognized for what they're doing. And then there are a couple of other things that are important. They like to be able to volunteer with their children or other family members. And then for some of them, it's mandated. It's either court-ordered community service, or it's work that they have to do as a student to have hours. Next slide. And then these are some of the reasons that volunteers volunteer. They care about a cause. They want to save animals. They want to teach kids to read. They want to get involved to make their community better. They like to spend their time doing things that they're interested in. They like to socialize. They want to build their skills. So you can see that this is backing up that previous slide of, again, why they're volunteering. Next slide. So we didn't really talk. I mentioned a culture of appreciation. And so what does that mean exactly? So in a culture of appreciation, your volunteers are integrated into your organization's work. I wonder how many of you that have organizational charts. On the org chart, do you have your volunteers listed on the organization chart? And when you report out to your board or to your community or in your annual reports, do you have information about these are the volunteers that we have and how integral they are to the work of the organization? They want to feel valued, and they want to be celebrated for the impact that they bring to your organization. And organizations need to build and acknowledge teams. They need to include the volunteers in meetings. So if you've got a big project coming up and you're going to be utilizing a volunteer, are you including volunteers in that brainstorming, not just in the implementation, but in the concept and the development of what it is that you're trying to do in the community? And organizations also celebrate together. They will try to bring together the leadership, their board of directors, the staff, and the volunteers all together so that they understand that they're appreciated. Next slide. And we're actually going to skip over that because we're going to run short on time. I want to do a little bit of brainstorming on some volunteer recognition strategies. So there was a volunteer recognition study done that, it just underwrites everything else that we're saying, that volunteers like their work to be recognized, but they prefer that with personal notes over gifts. And I know a lot of times I will hear organizations say, well, we can't afford to buy this for our volunteers. We have a very small budget. We can't afford all of the gifts that a lot of larger organizations may have. But that's not what's necessary for a volunteer to feel appreciated and valued. And this research kind of backs that up, that a personal note doesn't cost us anything. Well, time is expensive, but taking the time to write the note to the volunteer is very meaningful for them. And further, it said more than 2/3 of the volunteers that responded said they would prefer to be recognized with handwritten thank you notes and kudos from other staff members. And I see Jennifer saying, do a volunteer of the month. I'm not monitoring the chat probably as well as I should, but I just saw Jennifer say, and I want you to share this as well when we get to this, to do a volunteer of the month every month and every quarter. And you send thank you notes to all your volunteers. Yay, that is great, Jennifer. That's a really personal way for them to know that you appreciate what they're doing. Next slide. So some easy ideas for recognition. Handwritten notes. When your volunteers come in and are there on site, are you greeting them? You greet your staff, you should greet your volunteers. If you've got some little small gifts that you could give them to share, do that. Have an annual recognition event. Have the staff give thank yous to the volunteers. And volunteers can also thank the staff as well, so that we've got a culture going both ways. If you've got some training opportunities for your volunteers, we will frequently invite our volunteers to attend training sessions. And these days, with a lot of training being online and at no cost, there is that opportunity to be able to help them to get new skills, which they're very interested in doing. Recognition for their years of service, which we'll get to at the end of this session. And as Jennifer just said, the volunteer of the month and the year. So next slide. So now I want to, can we unmute Daphne and maybe have a few people say some things? Because I'd like to hear sharing on that, or we can put it in chat. But we've talked about there are 3 major ways that volunteers are motivated. You've got the folks that want to achieve something. You've got folks that want to influence something. And then you've got the volunteers that like to be affiliated in some way with the people that they're working with. And so in the next slide, we're going to just kind of talk quickly about, based on these different motivational impulses, if you were to think through some ideas to recognize volunteers, I'll start with the easy one first, I guess. Those that are more motivated by affiliation. So they like the relationship building. So what are some ideas that you either do or think would be good ideas to try to motivate and recognize your volunteers that are more influence or more affiliation related? So someone can raise their hand or they can put it in the chat and we'll try to capture that. No ideas?
Okay. So we do have one, okay, from Miss Jennifer. She said, we also do a volunteer dinner in February every month, and in fall, we do a volunteer breakfast. With our volunteer of the month, we interview them and do an article about them and how they help our community. Then I have a swag bag I give them.
That's great. Do a lot of you try to get your volunteers together for some sort of interactive activity for socials, or maybe even working at another nonprofit to do a project? So anybody have any other ideas of things that you do to try to motivate those volunteers that like that affiliation with each other? We're going to go on to the next one. So volunteers, well, the next motivating, so back one more. So volunteers that are motivated more by a sense of achievement What would be a strategy or two that you could have in your recognition arsenal for those that are motivated through achievement? I think what what I've seen some organizations do is in their actual annual reports, they will have articles about their volunteers, and not, yes, volunteer of the month and volunteer of the week and year, but also projects that their volunteers have done that have had a successful impact in the community. I see something in the chat.
Yes, Kim, so you have Jennifer who said that they have been volunteering for a long time. You could do pins. Then we have Miss Joanne Rivens who says we have volunteer wall where we hang pictures. I work with high school kids and we do a year-end ceremony. So the student that shows up the most and has the highest hours gets an additional award.
That's a good idea too. We were going to collect all of these ideas and send these out to you so that you would have, a nice list of ideas of ways to recognize your volunteers. And in the last one, which is the influence, so volunteers that are motivated through being able to influence something that the organization is doing, or influence the impact in the community on something where they would like to share their experience. What are a couple of things that you could do to try to motivate those volunteers?
We have someone in the comment that said we will share projects that individuals and or groups of volunteers are working on in our weekly teammate news via email to the organization.
And then it looks like Joanne said she wrote an article in the church magazine, and it turned to be a community, had a message block that. A community helping community initiative. That's a great idea too. Have you ever thought about if we're treating our volunteers as staff, and a staff member does a particularly good job consistently, and they have good ideas, and they're reliable and all of those things, and you promote them. So instead of being the coordinator of a project, they're the manager of a project, or they're the director of a department. You can do that with your volunteers too. So that recognizes their ability to influence the way that a project may be managed. And so maybe they're managing a group of volunteers to accomplish something for your organization. So being able to recognize the talents of your volunteers, and especially those who are skilled volunteers that really like to share their experience, integrating them into some management kind of positions is a great way to utilize those skills. We do a training with Service Enterprise, which is it's from Points of Light, where we train organizations on how to, and my screen just went, Daphne, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because my screen kind of just all went away.
Okay.
But they, it trains organizations on how to utilize skilled volunteers into more of what is thought of as the fabric of staffing positions. So having a volunteer who is your marketing manager, or your marketing director, or your finance coordinator. So there are a lot of ways where you can recognize the input of your volunteers through some of the same ways that you do that with staff. I think we're coming toward the last slide before I turn it. Yep. So Daphne, you're going to talk a little bit about the Governor's Volunteer Service Award, and we want to really understand and reward these volunteers for all that they do for us. And one really great way to do that is to nominate them for the Governor's Volunteer Service Award. So
Yes,
Daphne, I'm going to let you take it away, and I can't see anything, so I'm just going to be here listening.
perfect. Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you, everyone. Give me just a moment, and we're going to start with the actual nomination form. So give me just a moment. All right. And with a thumbs up, can anyone let me know if they see the 2023 Governor's Volunteer Service Award nomination eligibility and submission guideline? You do? Perfect. So for the Governor's Volunteer Service Award, as we all know, it honors the true spirit of volunteerism by recognizing individuals and groups that make a significant contribution to their community through volunteer service. There are different categories for the type of nominee: senior, youth service, family, group, etc. Additional service categories include animal, environmental disaster, veteran, military, cultural, and so on. County recommendations are viewed by the commission, and awards are given out in the counties. These guidelines and application form are provided below. So I won't go over everything, but mainly stick to the key points here. So eligibility, you talk about what they're looking for. Self-nominations are not allowable. Nominations cannot be based upon serving as a lone executive. National service volunteers must be nominated for service that goes above and beyond requirements of their national service program. And again, that's the national service volunteers. Volunteer hours logged in a national service program will not be considered. The nominator for point 6, the nominator may not serve as the only reference. Nomination attachments, supporting documentation, photographs, letters, and so forth will not be accepted. I think there were a few questions earlier, or excuse me, in 2022 regarding that. If folks could send in photographs, and no, we will not accept it. Point 8, and I'll send out a reminder again within the next few weeks that the deadline is Wednesday, February 15, 2023 to submit in your chosen nomination forms. As you all may know, as county award coordinator, you may have your own deadline to meet the deadline of Wednesday, February 15th. And if you do have any questions, just hold them for me at the end. I'm more than happy to send any follow-ups or answer any questions. So also we're talking about the award selections, and award selections are based on the nominee's volunteer efforts and commitment of time, accomplishments, community impact, and enhancement of the lives of others as described on the nomination form. The commission will select award recipients based on merit and eligibility. Recipients are selected without regard to race, ethnicity, religion, gender, national origin, or physical or mental disability. Nominations for the Governor's Medallion Award are reviewed and evaluated by a statewide review panel that determines the recipients of the board. I also forgot to touch base with the medallions, and I know everybody is kind of familiar with it, but for our new county award coordinators, so usually we award recipients 20 to 25 medallions. And so what happens is you have the county award coordinators that submit in those forms, but before submitting in the forms, they're going to select one person to receive the Governor's Medallion Award, which is the highest honor. So when we move forward to Section 1 nomination categories, there were a few changes in 2022. Actually reflected as youth, senior, family, group, team, perseverance, and volunteerism, Latino, faith-based entity, corporate business, national service, director, volunteers. Well, what we did this year after reviewing 2022, we wanted to have the ability to make the nomination form as easy as possible and not as complicated. So to streamline it, we condensed those roles for it to be individual, group, team, national service, director, volunteers. In addition to that, for example, if you had, say, for example, a faith-based entity or so forth, and it's a group, well, obvious that would go into a group. Family considers a group. So that's how it worked. Then you have your area of volunteer service here. You have veteran, military, youth service, seniors, historically underserved populations, disaster, animals, cultural, environment, health and human services, lifetime achievement, other. Always feel free if what is not listed is, if what you're looking for is not listed, just please feel free to put it in the other section.
And Daphne, I'll just throw something in real quick on that. We get a lot of questions from our agencies that sometimes confused on that part where they go, oh, I need to nominate someone that is a young person, a youth for youth service, but that's not what this area of service is about. It is the type of activity that that volunteer is doing. So that it really means people that are working in that youth service area, not that they have to be youth. So we frequently have different organizations that will have questions about that. So I just thought I'd jump in and clarify that.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Thank you for pointing that out. And so as you move forward, you have your section 2, nominee information. If you see last year, how do I find the county's deadline? Oh, and there is a question. Okay. So section 2, if you look, you would have your title, name, organization, address, city, email address, phone number. But then in 2022, the 2022 nomination form did not reflect if you are a youth or senior volunteer, please check the appropriate box below. So this is brand new on the 2023 Governor's Volunteer Awards form. And as we go through, just make sure to enter in the amount of volunteer service hours. Also, I would like to mention briefly about our online nomination forms. So what will happen is if you do have your nonprofits that you encourage, hey, just apply online or fill out the online form, make sure that they have their county of volunteer service hours. I've noticed that some nominees or nominators, that are submitting in the nominees are not putting in the county, the area of volunteer service in which county they were in. So make sure if you do refer them to the online site, just make sure to inform them of that. And so as we go through the form, you have, please explain the main reasons this nominee is being nominated, describe the nominee's outstanding commitment to volunteerism and to the agency or organization they served. Always remember to mention outstanding accomplishments and how the impact of their services help meet critical needs in their community, and describe the nominee's special skills, qualities, and or leadership. With that said, we're going to move forward also to some effective tips for an ideal candidate. What is your ideal candidate when you're selecting the nominee to receive the Governor's Volunteer Awards? And also this information will go out in email as well, just to emphasize what Kim said earlier. So for example, when you're selecting your nominee and you're writing them, select the nominee type in the service category that best describes the person you are nominating. If the volunteer meets the criteria for multiple categories, please select all categories that apply to their service. Remember, all nominations are evaluated and scored by multiple reviewers at the local and state level. Reviewers may not know anything about the nominee other than what is on the nomination form. So the more thorough and well-written the nomination is, the better. Be concise and direct. Write the nomination from the heart, but provide information that is clear, concise, and easy to read. Reinforce what you are saying with observations, facts, and concrete examples. Too much information can be as harmful as too little information. Include numbers. How many hours has the volunteer donated? How much money did they raise? How many students were helped? How many meals were delivered? Statistics can help reinforce the accomplishments of the nominee. Be sure to describe why your nominee's commitment, accomplishments, and special skills qualities are distinguishable over other volunteers. Share what stands out and what truly makes the volunteer outstanding and worthy of the award. Be sure to proofread your statements. Grammatical errors and misspelled words detract from the quality of the nomination. Be sure the nomination has all required signatures, nominator, and one additional reference. And be sure the completed nomination form is submitted by the deadline that has been determined by the county coordinator of the awards program.
And I'll jump in here and just say this nomination narrative is probably the most single important section of the application. And so many, I mean, you're nominating these volunteers because they are special, extraordinary, amazing, and have helped you accomplish things. And to use those kinds of cliched statements that this is an amazing volunteer, they're terrific, that doesn't help the judges when they're trying to read through this and they've got 100 nominations that they're looking at, or maybe closer to 200 that they're looking at. And all of them are saying, this is an amazing volunteer. They've made a tremendous difference. We couldn't do what we do without them. And there's no specificity. That really does not help your nomination to move forward, because the judges are going to see that and they're going to understand that's true of all of the volunteers. So as Daphne said, what makes this volunteer stand out, and use specific examples, and that will go a long way to making an impactful nomination for your nominee.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And then also, we're talking about deadlines. So right now, at the moment, we are in the works of getting a deadline. Right now, we're in the process of working on the deadline to get the county award coordinators, the selected nominee information. We're looking at March to get that information to you all, or at least end of April, early March. However, I will send that information out in a few weeks in email with an updated and hard deadline or hard time for you to have that information. And someone asked a great question here. So how do I find the county's deadline? They're searching for Wake County and can't find anything except the state site. Would you have the link? So yes, I can send you the Wayne County Award Coordinator email, so that way you can get the information, Gail, but also that would be Miss Kim and Miss Adrian as well, that are the Wake County Award Coordinators. So I'll make sure to get that information to you. And then I have from Erica with Animal Assisted Therapy team.
And go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kim. Would animal assisted therapy teams fall under the animal category? Yes, Erica, it would. Please, Kim, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. So our center handles Wake County, Orange County, Durham County, Person County, and Granville County. And we just extended the deadline again to January the 17th, which gives you another week to get your nominations in. And that gives us time to review all of those nominations and get them to the governor's office. But it's on our website. And I think, Daphne, if they go to your main page and your county coordinators are there, they can see who it is that is the county coordinator for that program.
That is correct. Thank you, Kim, for pointing that out.
Yep.
And then also, just to touch on one more point, which is, what is the purpose of a county award coordinator? So the county award coordinator, I look at it as, is the individual that is the liaison between myself and the nonprofits, where instead of a whole bunch of nonprofits just sending in a whole bunch of emails or nomination forms to VolunteerNC, the county award coordinator is the individual that will collect those nomination forms from the nonprofits, go through the process of selecting 10 nominees, and then that one individual for the medallion, and then they send that information into us. So that is what the role of the county award coordinator. And Kim can take it from here.
So I'm going to kind of explain the process that we use. We've been doing a Volunteer of the Year recognition event for, gosh, Adrian might correct me on this, but this will be our 49th year of doing Volunteer of the Year awards. And we know that that's an important thing for our volunteers, but it's also an opportunity for us to get other people engaged in that process. So when we first put that out, when the governor's office announces that the nominations are open, we share that with the listserv that we have for our nonprofits. And we have about 1,200 nonprofits that are on our list. And if you want to be on our list, we're happy to share with you all the information that we share out. But during that time, we're encouraging the nonprofits to submit their nominations. And oh, let me just say one thing. If you are nominating multiple volunteers, we discourage multiple nominees for a single category. So if you've got two people that you're nominating in youth services, if you think about it, they're competing against each other. And so we recommend that if you want to nominate multiple folks from your organization, look at the different areas of service or the different kinds of a volunteer. If they are, if it's a group or a team, or if it's an individual, then they're not really going to necessarily be competing against each other. So we've had some agencies that will nominate 8 people in a senior category, and in essence, 7 of those don't win and 1 possibly does. So it's just kind of think through that when you're developing your nominations, that you're really being thoughtful about how and who is going to be in which category. But as I was saying, we will take the opportunity to incorporate other people. We recruit a team of judges, and it's not just our staff that are looking at the nomination forms, but we'll get some community opinion leaders involved in helping us review each of these nomination forms. And then once those nominations are completed and we've submitted them to the state, as Daphne said, you can have up to 10 nominees that are the winners of the Wake County Governor's Award winners. And there are up to 10 of those that can be nominated. And then of those 10, the one that has the highest score, so that's another thing that we do, is that we have a scoring rubric, which I can share with you, where we will rate different areas of the narrative, of the hours that they serve, so that there's a little more objective way to be able to rate the volunteers that have been nominated, so that then the judges use that rubric. They're reading the nomination form, and then they're scoring that, so that when they come together, they've got documentation to be able to discuss and say, well, this volunteer scored 39, this volunteer scored 20, and so that they're able to make thoughtful and kind of scientifically based decisions based on the scoring that they've been able to do using that rubric. Once we've done that, and we hear back from the state on if we've gotten a medallion winner or not, and as Daphne said, there are 20 to 25 of those. We have an annual event that we do, and we've done, like I said, for 48, 49 years, where we have a luncheon where we recognize these volunteers that have been nominated, and we invite the nonprofit, the volunteers, and I think this is kind of an important aspect of it. We also invite some of our elected officials and opinion leaders in the community, so that they can help us make these award presentations. It means a lot to a nonprofit when they're getting a Volunteer of the Year award, and Senator Woodard or Senator Fuchsie or any of their elected representatives, or your mayor, if they're there making that presentation, that means an awful lot to that volunteer. And it also gives your organization visibility with people who are decision makers in your community, and they're seeing the impact that your organization makes in the community. So, it's a great way to involve your elected officials in that process. And then kind of I think it was Jennifer that mentioned this, we also do a volunteer of the week. And what we do is, because we get these nominations from our nonprofits, we don't have to have a separate process for that. We reuse those nominations, and the people that have been nominated, then we put in a calendar, and one of them is the volunteer of the week, and we put that on our website. So the volunteer actually gets recognized at this event, and they get a certificate, but then they're also going to be on your website and any social media that you have where they're recognized as the volunteer of the week. So that's another good way to be able to reuse these nomination forms. And you know, it means a lot to these agencies. So I'm happy to share some of the things that we do. And I think that's really all that I have. I mean, happy to answer any questions. I still can't see anyone. I've just got a white screen. So if there's a question in chat, or if someone wants to unmute, you can do that. But I can't see anything except a rolling yellow wheel on my white screen.
Well, Kim, we do have one question. Well, I'm sorry, two. How do you fund this luncheon?
So a couple of ways. We work with the hotel to get the cheapest price possible, first of all. And we generally will ask the agency that is making the nominations for them to pay for their volunteer and themselves. So it just seems a little awkward to ask the volunteer to pay to attend a luncheon that is honoring them. So we encourage, we can't force, of course, but we encourage the nonprofit to pick up that fee. We also try to get some corporate sponsorships to underwrite the cost of the lunch so that
Kim, I cannot hear you. Can anyone else hear Kim?
it
Uh-oh. Okay.
it's
No.
can you hear me? You can't
We
hear
can
me.
hear you now. Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure where you quit hearing me, but we also utilize corporate sponsorships to try to underwrite that direct cost, so that instead of it being, say, $30 for lunch, maybe it's $25. But we do ask the nonprofit that made the nominations to pay for that lunch and not the volunteer.
Okay, and then we
Is
have
there another question?
There is another question. I'm so sorry. This question was actually submitted before the question I just read out, but it says, could you talk about the group team special volunteer type? Could that be a nonprofit organization or a team within the organization? Thanks.
Well, it could be both. I mean, if it's a nonprofit that has a team of folks that are working to do a project for another nonprofit, then that would qualify. But the nonprofit could, it seems, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Daphne, that if a group of nonprofit staff is helping their own nonprofit, that's like a self-nomination. So it could be any kind of group as long as you're helping another organization.
Correct. That is correct. Okay. The next question we have, do you invite award winners' family members? So
We do. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Kim. That was your question. Yes.
We do. And what we leave it up to the organization. We say, normally the organization that made the nomination would pay for that volunteer, and they may want to also include the family members, but that's kind of a one-on, individualized discussion. But if they would like to invite their family members, that is fine. Sometimes the family members will pay for themselves because they don't want to burden the nonprofit with having to pay for a husband and 3 children to see the mom get this award. So they will pick up themselves the fee for that. But some nonprofits may say, we're willing to, pay for you and your spouse and a child. It's really up to each individual nonprofit.
Jennifer said, our county values our volunteer program and pays for our volunteer appreciation and our governor's award winter luncheons.
That's cool. See, I think that is a great grant opportunity. To write a grant to that and to say that what you're doing is not a fundraising gala. It's not, a social function, that what you're really doing is that you are showing the impact and showing appreciation for the impact that your volunteers are making. And I really, a lot of companies say they support giving back to the community. And so I think that's just a really good opportunity for organizations to get corporate support and to get government support.
You're absolutely right. And looking at the market, it is now 2:00. So if there were any other questions, I'll send up a follow-up email in just a moment with all the things that we talked about today. So please feel free to email me there. Also, I will share Kim Shaw's email. Or Kim, did you want to drop your email in the chat?
I can't do anything
Oh, that's right.
because my screen is not working.
Okay. So
I'm sorry.
No worries. So I
Share it.
wanted to say, Kim, thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us today and co-hosting with me today. Thank you for joining us today, participants. And as a friendly reminder, again, today's webinar link, a survey for today's program, materials from today's program, and registration links for our upcoming programs will be available in the email. The next Lunch and Learn webinar is to be announced, so please keep your eyes out for the announcement when it comes out. So thank you all. You all have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful rest of your week.
Goodbye.
Stop share. Okay. And okay. And
Daphne, I see you, but I know you don't see me.
okay. No, I don't. And I am sure we got. Okay. There we go. Stop.